This is the day which we have been given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen. A quick moment of pew etiquette as we start. There are lots of people here today. There are more people coming. It's important that this is a place where people can come on Sunday morning. So, would you be so kind as to scoot towards the center of your pews so that we make room for people coming in? Welcome, everyone, to Unity Church-Unitarian on this Sunday morning. I'm the Reverend Dr. Oscar Sinclair. It is good to be together in all of the ways, to join together in community, to practice the holy scoot, to always make room. It is good to gather. I'm joined in our chancel this morning by our Minister of Congregational Care, Lara Cowton, and our worship associate this morning, Anna Newton. If this is your first time here at Unity Church, and I met some of you as you were coming in this morning, know that you are welcome here. If you have been here for decades, know that you are welcome here as well. If you are joining us on the live stream, you are welcome with us this morning. If you've come here seeking to be spiritually nourished, you are welcome. If you've been away a little bit and then something happened this week, and this is where you need to be today, welcome home. If something happened this week and you thought, I think I need to be at a church, and you looked up and found Unity Church-Unitarian, this is a good place to be together. Unity Church is a place to find and keep your balance, and a community that inspires us to live a loving life of integrity, service, and joy. Know that whatever brings you here, your gifts and your wounds are welcome in this place. If you are visiting this morning, I will invite you to fill out the visitor card in the back of the pew in front of you, and as the offering is taken later in the service, to place that in the basket so that we know who you are and can follow up if you want. If you are visiting, please consider coming to our Finding Yourself at Unity session that'll be in the center room after this service. I believe the topic is congregational care, appropriately, this week. As we enter into this time of worship, take a moment, find a comfortable place in your body, in the pew, center yourself, and hear our bell.
Good morning. We begin with these words from Reverend Lisa Daig, written for the first Sunday after 9/11. Why a flaming chalice? The question comes. It's the cup of life, we answer. A cup of blessings overflowing, a cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst, a cup of wine for celebration and dedication, the flame of truth, the fire of purification, oil for anointing, for healing, out of chaos, fear, and horror. Thus was this symbol crafted 3 generations ago. So may it be for us. In these days of uncertainty, sorrow, and rage, and a light to warm our souls and guide us home. Come, let us worship together. Breathe. Please join me in saying our chalice lighting words. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, the warmth of truth and the light of love. The day after the election, I awoke in the eye of the storm. Swirling winds of political discontent were nearing hurricane strength as the election approached, and I was increasingly anxious. When I went to vote, my hand shook so much I feared coloring outside the lines on the ballot. Breathe, just breathe. Once home, I turned the radio off, FaceTimed with family, did yoga, went for a long walk, cooked, anything to keep from thinking about the election. We went to bed not knowing what morning would bring. By 4:30, I was awake. Do I dare check my phone? Holding my breath, I clicked, and I saw one news outlet after another call the election for the former president. So it was settled. The people had spoken. I grieved for might have been. The day would dawn in dense fog, but by noon the sun was bright and the sky blue. It was as if I was in the eye of the storm. In a strange way, a weight had been lifted, and I was calm. People who experience a hurricane speak of the clouds and the wind and the waves that mark the approach of the storm, and that when it actually hits, the wind and the rain are so fierce you can't stand upright, and the sound of the wind is so loud you can't hear yourself screaming. And then suddenly the clouds part, and the sun shines as the eye of the storm passes overhead, and it is eerily silent. Hurricane survivors warn that the calm is deceptive, however, as the other side of the storm will return to sweep you away should you foolishly step outside. There are many ways to grieve: shock, disbelief, anger, and fear abound in this moment. I don't know what the next days will bring. I fear the consequences of anti-science ideology. I fear violence against the powerless, human and non-human. We may need to lay low while we wait for the back end of this storm to pass, but my hope is that we emerge from our storm shelters ready to celebrate what is good in this world and to work to repair the social fabric this storm has torn apart.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. Let us join together now. Let us breathe together now. As we share with one another the milestones, the sorrows and the joys and the celebrations of our life, we do this in community, and it connects us one to the other. This is how we care for each other, by giving others the opportunity to care for us. We bring love into the world. From within our community today, we hold in our caring embrace Chalice, whose father, Price Chenot, died yesterday after a heart attack last week. Price was an active member of Unitarian Universalist churches throughout his adult life, and he enjoyed coming to Unity services whenever he visited Callie and her family, Eric Amundsen, and their children, Sam and Sophia Price Chenot. We hold them in our care today. We lift, too, in our communal embrace and prayers, Vincent Grundmann, who was in a serious accident this past week. He was hit by a car while riding his bicycle. Vincent's injuries are very severe. He is on life support at Regents Hospital, surrounded by family. We hold them all in our prayers of healing, of peace, of comfort. We hold in our tender embrace Suzanne Burr, whose sister Lori died on Wednesday, surrounded by loving family. We send our compassionate care and prayers to Suzanne and her family in this time of grief. We lift Betty Cowie in our caring embrace as she faces her final days, as she faced her life for 100 years with curiosity, peace, and courage. Her family is at her side. She's been engaged actively with our Unity group at Episcopal Homes until her health declined last month. . Among us, here today in the sanctuary, online, and in our greater community, there are those in pain and grieving the death of a beloved, a chronic illness, or newly diagnosed concerns. There are those battling, even more so this week, the weight of mental illness, loneliness. Among us are those who are reeling with the results of this past week's election in shock, in grief, anger, numbness. There's pain and fear. And among us, too, are those wondering how to find balance and understanding as the world just doesn't seem to make sense this week. Among us are those whose daily spiritual practice includes caring for children, worrying and wondering about their futures, as so many things are changing in this world along with an increasingly warm climate. There are those among us who are afraid for themselves and others, those who are trans, those who love people of the same sex, those who have uteruses and care for those who have uteruses. We see you. We hold you. We are you. And we care for one another. On this eve of Veterans Day, known around the world as Armistice Day and Remembrance Day, may we remember to pause with thoughtful gratitude on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, as we honor and recognize the commitment, bravery, determination, pride, and vision that led people, ordinary people, to do extraordinary things, to help build a future for freedom, justice, democracy, and safety for all people, regardless of race, class, gender, politics, or nationality. Let us never forget. I invite you now to lift into this space or in the silence of your heart the names of those that you wish to lift into our communal embrace today. Our words for prayerful reflection today come from the Reverend Sherry Woodbury, who serves as senior minister at the First Unitarian Church of Omaha. Again, we reground ourselves here in our highest values.
Love is the center and foundation of this faith.
Love is the power that holds us together as a community.
As we worship, then, let us open our hearts to the healing power of liberating love.
Because love is not only something that we receive, but something we practice in community.
Let fall away all that might distract us from the wholehearted practice of love.
Let us be accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love.
as we continue to listen and learn, to act and grow.
May each unfold in wholeness,
Both deeply loving and truly loved.
let us share now in a moment of silence for our own reflection and prayer.
Unity Church is framed by statements of conscience, known as its ends statements. One of those is to generously give and openly receive compassionate care in times of joy, sorrow, and transition. Our compassionate care extends beyond the walls of this church to communities with whom we share a common interest. Each week, the larger portion of our offering goes to these community partners. And this week's offering goes to the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE. CARE is America's largest Islamic civil liberties and advocacy group. CARE-MN actively engages with the media to ensure that a fair and accurate portrayal of Islam and Muslims is presented to the Minnesota public. CARE works vigorously on behalf of community members experiencing discrimination and helps remedy cases through in-person negotiations that include filing charges of discrimination, letter writing, and referrals to the Minnesota Attorney Network. Protecting the rights of Minnesota Muslims is at the core of CARE Minnesota's mission. Will the ushers now please come forward? May the work of our hands and the generosity of our hearts be given in gratitude this day. Let the offering now be taken.
From Dietrich Bonhoeffer, 1942. The danger of allowing ourselves to be driven to contempt for humanity is very real. We know very well that we have no right to let this happen, and that it would lead us into the most unfruitful relation to human beings. The following thoughts may protect us against this temptation. Through contempt for humanity, we fall victim precisely to our opponent's chief errors. Whoever despises another human being will never be able to make anything of him. Nothing of what we despise in another is itself foreign to us. How often do we expect more of the other than what we ourselves are willing to accomplish? Why is it that we have hitherto thought with so little sobriety about the temptability and frailty of human beings? We must learn to regard human beings less in terms of what they do and neglect to do, and more in terms of what they suffer. The only fruitful relation to human beings, particularly to the weak among them, is love. That is, the will to enter into and to keep community with them. God did not hold human beings in contempt, but became human for their sake.
Good morning. The morning after the 2016 election, Melanie DeMoore, a wonderful song leader, composer, and back then she was music director at a UU church in Oakland. One of her young children came up to her to tell her that a kid in school had said that black people are going to be slaves again now. And, he asked her, is that true? And she came up with this song and sang it to her kid and then put it up on YouTube. So this is Lead with Love.
Don't give up hope. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. We gotta put one foot in front of the other and be one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. One foot in front of the other and lead with love. Lift up your eyes. Don't you despair. Look up ahead. The path is there. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. One foot in front of the other
I was in 10th grade on September 11th. My parents had just moved my sister and I from the Midwest to Binghamton, New York, a year earlier. New York was suddenly the big city in our lives, and that August we had driven the 4 hours down to Manhattan to see the sights for the first time. The Natural History Museum, walking down Central Park West, past what I know now as Fourth Universalist, but wasn't a landmark then for me. Past Lincoln Center, down to Times Square, through Midtown, through Greenwich Village, down to Lower Manhattan and the big transit hub just off of Wall Street, the World Trade Center, where we caught the train back to where we had parked the car. A month later, on Tuesday morning, I was just starting my second year at a new high school. I thought I knew how this was going to go when everything stopped. Walking out of second period, there were rumors in the hallway that something had happened. And then from 9:30 to 2 o'clock, nobody got any schoolwork done. We would walk into class and the TV would be on. So often a sign that the day was going to be easy and fun. One class to the next would toggle from shocked silence to crying to, oh my God, what are we going to do? And then I showed up at 8th period, Mr. Seward's earth science class, and the TV was off. And we walked in puzzled. Didn't he know what was happening? He did, he told us. Well, can't we turn on the TV and watch? No, he said. We were going to do the lesson on plate tectonics that we had all prepared for. The goal of these people, he told us, was to change who we were, and we were not going to give them the satisfaction of winning in that way. And then he taught about plate sublimation for 40 minutes. Now, in my memory, John Seward is middle-aged, not one of the young and cool teachers that we all liked. He had a beard and a bit of a monotone delivery. I don't know if he was anyone's favorite teacher, and a few years later he went to work at another district as a vice principal. But I think, looking back, that he was likely about the age that I am now. He had young kids that weren't yet in school, and late 30s look like middle age when you're 15. I think about that moment a lot. I think about him in that moment a lot, looking out at a classroom of teenagers, kids, and wondering on that day what the hell he could say to make sense of any part of it. And I think about how he, not the charismatic teachers the kids loved, or the history teachers who spent their days putting big events in context, or the government or debate teachers, but Mr. Seward, the earth science teacher, who got at the heart of the thing. That we should not, that we must not consent to be defined by this. That the best way to respond was to keep moving forward, to teach, to learn, to be with each other. So much came out of that day. Lisa Day's Chalice lighting that we started the service with. Sarah Dan Jones was writing meditation on breathing. Days where the foundations shake, as one of my colleagues wrote. We had an election this week as a country. Right now, Donald Trump has been elected to a second term as president by what appears to be a majority of Americans. The Republican Party will have a majority in the United States Senate. The House is still undecided. Here in Minnesota, it appears that the state House of Representatives will be a 67-67 tie, while the DFL will maintain control of the Senate and governor's office. In the state that I just moved from, where Sherry Woodbury is still doing good ministry, a ballot measure creating a right to abortion in the state constitution failed, while another ballot measure limiting abortion to the first trimester passed. Now, it is true that every election there are people disappointed in the outcome, and it is an uncomfortable thing to speak directly from a pulpit about the results of an election. But this one is hard, because so much of what Donald Trump campaigned on is not just wrong from a policy perspective, but directly in conflict with the things that we proclaim from this place. We preach care for one another. He ran on fear and suspicion. Our poets write how there are no wrong people. He talks about the enemy from within. We talk about the unfinished possibility of the beloved community. He says we should go backwards to some imagined greatness that was not and will not be great for all. It is maybe a comfort in this moment, I know it is for me, to go back to the points of reference, to Lisa Day writing those words in 2001, to the song written in 2016. The place I keep going back to is 2004. I was so invested in that election. I knew that 2000 had been a mistake that we were going to fix, and then we woke up the morning after the 2004 election, and all of a sudden a majority of Americans had voted in a way that I thought they could not, that they would not. So one of the truths this week is perhaps that this is who we are as a country, who we have always been. Even as I also want to say that this is not all of who we are, right? Let America be America again, the poet writes, the land that never has been yet and yet must be. That is as true now as it was last week. It just hasn't been yet. But also this feels like more than just an election. That's why we're taking a whole service to talk about it. All week I've been getting texts, emails, calls from people who are not just disappointed in the results on Tuesday. Disappointment is a parent's word. But scared, terrified of what it will all mean. From federal employees looking through their social media posts over the last couple years, wondering if their jobs are safe, or if they will be counted among the enemy from within. From friends in states like Nebraska cut off from medical care and the right to decide what is right for them. from basically everybody I know working in the immigration space. This part's not written down. I had a teacher once who said that the best image of good pastoral care in the Bible was the book of Job. Because the book of Job, the majority of it is made up of trying to make sense of why bad things happen. But nobody gets a resolution to that question. But my teacher would say that the image of care is not the dialogue, it's the beginning, where these terrible things have happened and Job's friends show up and sit with him in the ash and despair, and for days they say nothing. Nothing. And it is only when they open their mouths and try to explain it that it all goes sideways. Sometimes a thing just is, and we hold it. Because what the hell can you say to make sense of any of it? There is so much we do not know about what comes next, and the fear is very real. But there's a lot that we do know. Last Sunday from this pulpit, I asked this question: what is the church called to be in the world? Who are we called to be? Feed the hungry, set the captives free, make what meaning we can in the world, testify to what happens when we center love, dismantling hatred and oppression. Do any of us think any of that has changed in the last 5 days? Okay. It's important to say that I wrote most of this sermon last weekend before Election Day. And that was important for me because that's the most important lesson that I have for today. Regardless of the result of the election, the work of the church goes on. If a different candidate had won, maybe more of us would be celebrating, but the message today would be, hooray, but we will not be saved by politics alone. The church, Martin Luther King reminds us, is not the state, it is the conscience of the state. It is the conscience of the state, and the conscience speaks from a deeper place than any single day or event. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German theologian and pacifist who was ordained the same year Hitler was elected chancellor in Germany. After periods of traveling abroad and teaching at Union Seminary in Manhattan, he returned to Germany on the eve of World War II, becoming part of a minority contingent of the Christian church that opposed the Nazi government. And it is almost impossible to understand Bonhoeffer's experience of the war years without knowing how the story ends. That the theologian of pacifism was arrested and eventually executed for his participation in a plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. After 10 years, where our reading came from this morning is a letter that Bonhoeffer wrote and distributed, not widely, it wasn't published in his lifetime. He wrote it to about a dozen of his friends, trying to make sense of the 10 years leading up to Christmas 1942. It's a Christmas card. Christmas 1942, around the first time that Unitarians were starting to use a flaming chalice as a symbol of refuge. But in that letter, Bonhoeffer is reflecting on the decade since his ordination and Hitler's election as chancellor, grappling with the madness all around him and his friends, how the country that is their home descended into tyranny and oppression, tyranny and suspicion. Few of us, he writes, have been spared the experience of being betrayed. One of the most often quoted passages begins, "The figure of Judas, once so incomprehensible, is hardly strange to us. The air in which we live is so poisoned with mistrust that we almost die from it." But he does not stop in that moment. Time and again, Bonhoeffer goes past the context of German history in 1942 and points to that which is eternal, the truth that he has devoted his life to, the teachings of his faith that refuse to be defined by the Third Reich. The air in which we live is so poisoned with mistrust that we almost die from it, but where we broke through the layer of mistrust, we were allowed to experience a trust hitherto undreamed of. He places his trust in a power of hope when others resign, a power to hold our heads high when all seems to have come to naught, a power to tolerate setbacks, a power that never abandons the future to the opponent but lays claim to it. That is what I want us to lay claim to in this place. Our faith, our hope, our love for each other and the world is not dependent on the election. A lot of us have been really tied up in it, and that's okay. I'm one of those people. It is a big, big thing that just happened in the world. But this church is going to be here for a lot of years, and we have work to do. So take some time. Catch your breath. Take care of yourselves and each other. Change your socks. But then we're going to keep doing what we've always done. We're going to keep becoming more of who we've always been, imagining a future and working towards it, because Mr. Seward was right 20 years ago. Bonhoeffer was right 80 years ago. We do not need to consent to being defined by this thing that happened. Our work stays the same. And that looks like really practical things sometimes. On Wednesday night, we'll gather for our weekly Wellspring Wednesday meal, honoring Native American Heritage Month. The presentation by Dr. Chris Mata Nunpa, who's the author of The Great Evil, Christianity, the Bible, and Native American Genocide, which details life on the res and the influence that 3 Christian mission churches had on the reservation community. We're going to gather and do programs on Wednesday night. Life at the church goes on. We will keep drawing attention to the big stuff in the world, keep encouraging all of us to attend to our spiritual practices. And we're going to ask you to show up. Because we are all of us, going to need each other in the coming days, months, and years. Church is a place where you show up even when your heart is breaking. And it is a place where you show up even when you don't want to, and you're thinking on Sunday morning, surely there are less inconvenient hobbies that I might have. That's when you show up because someone else's heart might be breaking, and they might be in the pew next to you, and they need you there. We do this together. One last piece, probably the most important. These are days that require courage. And courage is not an isolated act. We do not live in separate bubbles. When I was interviewing last April, we closed one of those services with a benediction from Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage because deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. You are not alone. Never, not ever. Just before the vigil we held here on Wednesday night, I was standing at the back of the sanctuary with KP Hong, our Minister of Faith Formation, and KP leaned over to me and quietly told me, Unity Church will not allow you to fail to meet this moment. These people know how to do this well. That's also a lesson for all of us, right? Unity Church will not allow us to fail to meet this moment. We will not let each other fail. There is a legacy of courage in this place. As you walk out this morning, walk right through those doors, look at the inscriptions on the walls of the entryway to the sanctuary. Look at what ministers have been preaching from this pulpit for 150 years. Look at how many of them speak of courage. That is the legacy of this place that we will carry forward. We will hold each other up. We will hold each other's pain. We will show up to search for meaning, to build a nobler world than we have known today. Never abandoning the future to the opponent, but laying claim to it. May it always be so. Our closing hymn is number 318 in the gray hymnal. Would you please rise and sing this together? We would be One foot in front of the other, beloveds. But not alone. Never alone. We do this together. May it always be, and amen.